Sort of, what are you all doing on this nice, fine Monday afternoon?
Talking to you on Zoom.
Yeah.
Aside from that, people out in the gardens.
Yeah, I'm out painting fences in a minute.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, I shall probably get on my bike this afternoon and go down on the coast. Thank you very much indeed.
Nice.
Oh,
Driving to West Wales.
All right, nice. You're there for? Did you say a week?
Yeah, best part of. As long as the weather lasts, I think probably.
I think you'll be all right.
It's a terrible place to be if the weather's foul.
Well, they are giving a good week. They are giving a good week, Nick, on the west coast. I have to say.
Yeah.
We had some really wet days while we were in Scotland, but some other nice sunny days. Plenty of beaches, sharing them with only one or two other people in a lot of the time. So really good.
My apologies for next week. I shall be in Plymouth,
Good man.
seeing my family for the first time for a year.
Oh, that's
You're
nice.
going on the train, Derek?
No, I'm being driven down.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
But you could take your computer and still join next week.
Well, I might do that. My mobile.
Derek, you mentioned when we had our guest from South Africa speak that you also lived there for a while.
Yes, I was a chaplain, domestic chaplain to the Archbishop. I lived in Cape Town.
It was a very nice part of Cape Town, isn't it? I know that area is a very well-to-do sort of place.
I lived at the back of the mountain where it rained a lot.
Right.
I had a wonderful time when I was there.
Yeah, they're going through their difficulties now.
Yeah, I once drove from Cape Town to Johannesburg and from there to Pretoria in 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Quite
That's
something.
incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, should we start the meeting? So welcome everybody to this meeting of the Leicester Rotary Club on the 14th of September 2020. I'd just like to say welcome to Pam Spokes. It's always great to have you on board. And also to our speaker, Tim Green, who will be joining us a bit later on. Any other guests I've missed? No? Okay. Greetings from other clubs. I went to the Leicester, the club of Leicester de Montfort. I went to join their meeting on Wednesday. They have a 7 a.m. breakfast meeting at College Court, and it was very nice. They were very accommodating, and it was nice to see a Rotary club trying to find a way to start to meet physically again. Unfortunately, back into Zoom meetings again from this week, but it certainly seems that members are very keen to get back to physical meetings when they can. So rest assured, I'm working very hard in the background to try and find a way for us to get back to physical meetings as soon as we can. But in the short term, it seems likely we'll be continuing with Zoom. So we'll do our best. Any other greetings from other clubs? No? Okay. I'd like to just mention on the website, for those of you who haven't been there for a little while, go and check out our projects page. Scott's done a fantastic job setting up our Rotary for Food Banks page and getting that linked up to Just Giving, and everything's all ready to go now. And we've got Age UK on board, and I'm actively speaking with other food banks locally to get them on board with us as well, so that we can start raising money. We've already got £2,000 almost in the pot, so that's looking good. And yeah, we're in the process of getting together volunteers on the one hand to help the food banks get the food there and stored and distributed, and also we're very busy now in raising the money to buy the food for the food banks through the initiative that District 1220 have set up, and they're very kindly allowing us to use their distribution network to get the food from their warehouse in Mansfield over to the food banks here in Leicester. So It's a wonderful initiative. Everybody I've spoken to about it seems very keen to get involved, and it's just going to be fantastic. So I'm looking forward to pushing that this year, and any help and support from members is very much appreciated. Okay, next item, I've also spoken to Voluntary Action Leicestershire. They've been very kind. I really had no idea how wide their services were in terms of offering, in terms of the help they can provide us. So they can help us with, I assumed it was just on the volunteering side, but actually they can help us raise funds. And already I've been given a couple of contacts. I'll have to send the details to members because I don't remember exactly what the names of the organisations, but the organisations in Leicester that will potentially provide us a few £1,000s to get going. So I'm going to be contacting them today. And so I'm very grateful for VALE for giving us that support. But there's a whole range of things that they do. So it looks very positive in terms of working with them. And I'm keen to do more with them because they have a very large, as I understand it, volunteer base, which I think would complement our club very well. Also, thanks to Chris for setting up a meeting with the Chief Exec of Age UK, Tony Donovan. I've also been speaking to Arif Varaji from Help the Homeless, who's very keen to get working with us. And also Sue McKenniff has been very helpful as well in connecting me with a few people she knows in the charitable sector who have volunteering opportunities. I'd also like to mention, I met, do you guys remember Rabbi Pink, who came to speak to us? I met him at the supermarket. He had his face mask on and he said, "How did you recognize me?" And I said, "I can't miss you, you've got this hat on." You know? So we had a good chat, and he's offered us the opportunity to go and visit their new synagogue. It's been refurbished now, and we can go and visit from October. Obviously, lockdown rules permitting. So if members would be interested in something like that, then perhaps we can talk further with the rabbi and maybe set up some visits at various religious places of worship, whether that's important churches, because I know we're very connected in that space. We've got the Gurdwara, which is the Sikh community that I'm part of. It'd be nice to visit a mosque as well, and a synagogue, and perhaps a mandir. So we're quite spoilt for choice in Leicester, and it'd be nice when things are a bit more settled that we can go and do those visits, because I think it's nice. It would be useful for us to kind of have that presence with all of the communities here in Leicester. Okay, do we have any notices from the Secretary?
No.
None? Okay. Anything from committee chairman?
Yeah, could I just mention, President, about the golf? We had our golf competition last Tuesday in very nice weather. There's 13 golfers played in it, and there's some very good scores. And Clive and Richard Power tied second with 34 points, and the winner was Mike Piper with a very high 38 points. So wow. He's won the Bastard Trophy. Just to remind people, it was £12 each on the day, and one or two of you only paid me tenner, so there's £2 extra to come from quite a few of you. I just thought I'd remind you of that. In the knockout, we're now at the Richard Miller's in the final, and the semi-final is between Richard Power and Adrian Keane. So when they played that, we'll have the final coming up, and I'll let you know who wins that. But yeah, it was nice to see the golfers all back together again.
Oh yes, yes. Do you play the Leicestershire?
Yeah, we played it at Leicestershire. Yeah. We had afterwards. We had some plates of sandwiches on the terrace, and it was such a lovely evening and drink. So whilst we weren't allowed in the clubhouse, we managed to have some a bit of food on the terrace. So it was very good.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it's a wonderful place. I mean, I live right nearby, and they let us sort of just wander around during the lockdown because there were no golfers about, and as long as we were respectful. And then it's nice now to see the car park full again, and everybody's enjoying themselves. So it's great. Okay, anything else from any of the committees? All right. Okay.
I noticed that John
Yes, sir.
Aldridge isn't here. I noticed that John Aldridge isn't here.
He isn't.
His wife is poorly.
Mhm.
and I must give him a ring then. I have spoke last week, but it's unusual for him not to join this meeting, that's all. I'll find out what's going on.
Okay, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. He was with us last week. Yeah, that would be great. And if you could update us as well, that would be appreciated, Derek.
Well, I think, Derek, from what he said last week, that June was still in hospital. She'd been in
Yeah,
hospital
she's
for a
got sepsis.
fortnight.
I think she's got sepsis.
That's right. But that was the secondary. She started with leukemia, and then
Yeah, that's right.
they were able to get that under control. But I think she's now got back into hospital, and she's under aggressive antibiotics because of sepsis. But I don't think he's been able to visit.
That's right. Well, you can't visit the hospitals at all.
No.
But yes, I'm surprised he's not here. That's all. But I'll give him a ring.
Please wish him all the best.
I do keep in touch.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Derek. Tim, if you're ready, I'll be I'll mute everybody, and then you can start. Give me 1 second. Okay, Tim, if you could unmute yourself.
How's that?
There we go, perfect. Okay, Tim's going to be speaking to us. Well, I have a very simple from porter to porter. That's all I have. So take it away, Tim. Look forward to it.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me. And I hope you can hear me and that you'll be able to see what I'm going to show you in a minute as well. As you've said, my name's Tim Green. I'm a retired orthopaedic surgeon. I've come up against a few of you in the time. But I have been retired 3 years, or at least I was until earlier this year. My talk is going to be based on the title that Ed Coughlin gave me, which is Porter to Porter. The reason he asked me to give a talk was as a result of him being unfortunate enough to have been partnered with me in a golf game. And he had to listen to my life story over 18 holes. And I think he thought that a vaguely virus-based NHS talk would cheer you all up. So let's see how we get on. Starting back in the beginning, my first exposure or encounter with the NHS was at a very young age. I very nearly didn't make it beyond my 5th birthday, having come up against a Haemophilus influenzae type B bacterial infection. This led to a swelling in my windpipe and resulted in an emergency admission to hospital. Just like in current times, the problems all related to breathing, and they stuck me in an oxygen tent, very much like the picture, and cut a hole in the front of my throat to relieve and bypass the blockage. Luckily for the world, I survived, although several other children on the ward didn't. So much for then, but what about now? What possible relevance does a childhood respiratory infection and near-death hospital experience have to the modern world? Well, I think we all know the answer to that. We're now all, sadly, only too familiar with the coronavirus and the effect it's had on the world and our healthcare systems. For me personally, it also meant that 3 happy years of retirement came to an abrupt end. General Medical Council, who had been very disgruntled when I stopped paying my registration fees on my retirement, got their own back by unilaterally deciding to make me a doctor again. With no elective surgery happening, a reduced amount of trauma going on, and a serious amount of forgotten knowledge on my part, I thought it better to take on a less critical role if I was going to return to hospital life. I therefore signed up as a porter at the Leicester Royal Infirmary A&E department, which doubtless is familiar to everyone here. As will become apparent, this wasn't such a big step for me, going from an orthopaedic consultant to Leicester's oldest porter. I had, after all, as you already know, as a child diced with death, and of course I've been pushing people around for years in my consultant role. The social breakdown aspect, when I was growing up, was slightly different. It wasn't people fighting over toilet rolls, but when I was growing up in the 1960s and 70s in Northern Ireland, things were a little bit more vigorous. And my experiences there do have a significant effect on how I turned out, and you're now going to hear all about it whether you want to or not. Growing up, I wasn't exactly dodging bombs and bullets on a daily basis, but I did see some action. Down the bottom here, oops. This was my school, the Royal Belfast Academical Institution, very close to the centre of Belfast, and even closer to the Europa Hotel, which is a picture of it. At that time, it had the dubious distinction of the most bombed hotel in the world. 33 times the building was attacked, and our school, being 200 yards down the way, did see a little bit of the effect of that. Different worlds, however. In my rather minor public school, life went on. This photograph is us in front of the school fencing club, posing with the headmaster, and this is me in the background. The local joke was that our school taught the cream of Ulster youth, namely the rich and the thick. It specialised in churning out future doctors, lawyers and engineers on the whole. Wasn't all that it turned out, however. Although we didn't know it then, there was a future East German secret policeman, a Stasi informer in our midst. This was Robin Pearson on the end here, and we didn't know at the time, but he became an informer for the East German government and was subsequently unmasked when the Berlin Wall came down and Germany was reunited. My own future, medical future that is, was about to start at that time though. In the summer holidays of 1975, I took on a job as a hospital porter at the Royal Victoria Hospital, Belfast, thus laying the foundations for my more recent experiences. The hospital was very much in the front line of Belfast, and we received the victims of terrorism every day. I can remember one morning coming in to find that the ITU had been the scene of a gun battle with bullet holes in the wall outside. For a 16-year-old though, the nurses in their starched uniforms and black stockings were of much more immediate interest, reinforcing in my mind the desirability of a medical career. The hospital itself was your typical Victorian building with a massive long corridor, one of which had a bank situated halfway down where staff could withdraw their money or deposit their cash. One day while I was working there, a fellow porter told us how he'd been passing that bank when he came across a policeman, a member of the RUC, standing holding a gun to the head of someone on the floor. We all marvelled at this foiling of an obvious bank robbery, only to find out the next day that the policeman had actually been an IRA man wearing disguise, and the man on the floor was a bank employee. A lesson to me then not to believe everything you're told or everything you see, but verify it yourself. I returned to school after the summer, only to fail to get the A-level results I needed for medical school. And so to support myself while I retook my exams again at night school, I took a day job as a roofer. The bombings that were going on at that time always meant that there was plenty of work in the Belfast area. The job itself was somewhat of an eye-opener for a young innocent like myself, in that my two fellow roofers, one of them was a local commander for the UDA, a Protestant paramilitary organisation, and the other was an Irish guardsman who'd been cashiered from the regiment for drunkenness before going on to become a doorkeeper for a brothel. I certainly learnt a lot that year. To my mother's great relief, however, I did subsequently succeed in getting the exam grades that I needed, and so I could give up roofing and prepare to move to England to take up my place at medical school. It was the University of Birmingham that had foolishly accepted me, and I arrived in September of that year with a suitcase and very high ambitions. I knew very little about the place itself, however, having only been there once for my interview. As it happened, I soon found out that an Ulster accent was not terribly welcome in the city, and so I modified my Ian Paisley-like delivery for the more modulated tones that I use now. Our second year at university was notable for yet another public health problem. We did our histology practical classes in these rooms along the top of the medical school. Unbeknownst to us, however, smallpox escaped from one of the laboratories on the ground floor, leading to the death of a researcher in the floor above. Once again, however, I dodged the killer disease. It's clear that at those days, graphic design was still in its infancy, and the pictorial representation of a smallpox virus compares fairly unfavorably with today's COVID pictures. Even so, I think the spiky halo around it all is somewhat reminiscent, perhaps a portent of our current day plague. Took more than a deadly disease to keep me down, however, and soon I'd fallen for a young lady who, contrary to her appearance here, she hadn't run away from a circus, but she was actually a psychology student on the Birmingham campus. On a bit of a roll now, by June 1982, against all the odds, I'd managed to qualify as a doctor and finally had a license to be let loose on the world. A year later, and with a regular wage coming in, I married my young lady, who, as you can see, had calmed down her makeup choices by this point. This rather blurry young man was the best man at our wedding. He's out of focus, firstly because there was a very large Irish contingent at the wedding, and secondly because it was held in a pub. Like me and the secret policeman, he appeared in the same fencing club photograph, and I include him because he's also gone on since to greater things. In his case, he hasn't gone on to be a secret policeman or a doctor, but he's had several roles in a small local television production called The Game of Thrones, and here he is as a Knight of the Vale, one of the many parts he's played. At this point, my own career by comparison was proving less successful. The map shows all the places I attended for job interviews during that time. From Aberdeen to Plymouth and from Belfast to Norwich, I experienced rejection on a regular basis and was still managing to clock up 25,000 miles a year, commuting to the few places that would have me. Obviously, I did manage to get home occasionally because 9 months after May Bank holiday in 1989, my son Andrew was born. Times were still hard, and the kipper box served at his bed until he outgrew it. He has subsequently, however, turned out to have musical talents and a dress sense for which I take no credit, blaming his bohemian mother for that instead. His father's career had by then taken a bit of a turn for the better, and here I am again at the back row of the picture. This was me working for a surgical implant company. Part of my job consisted, amongst other things, of attaching the implants to dead bodies to make sure that they fitted correctly, something that one had to have a medical degree to do. Fortunately, perhaps for me, one day a previous fellow, Philip Sell, telephoned me and asked if I'd be interested in a temporary job as a senior registrar in the hospital that he worked at. And so it was, I came to Leicester. This quiet and respectable East Midlands city was taken quite unprepared for my arrival. And within 2 years of my turning up, I'd succeeded in fooling enough of the people enough of the time to be offered a permanent post as a consultant. Thus it was, in the fateful year of 1995, 2 influential Ulstermen took up top positions in the city, and the way was now clear for Leicester to move up a league. At the same time, the football team under Martin O'Neill did okay as well. Establishing a practice that involved and covered spines, knees and trauma meant I was never short of work, and I enjoyed a great deal of professional satisfaction. The position also opened up other professional doors. Leicester hospitals have long established links with Ethiopia, and I know how much Rotary locally has done to support orthopaedic surgery over there. I was lucky enough to go over in the year 2000 to experience the difficult conditions in which they were working under at that time. One particular difficulty was the presence and high rate of another spiky infective virus here in the bottom right. And although the number of people has dropped, this HIV still affects about 1% of the population who are living with disease. Sadly, for me at least anyway, portering doesn't seem to enjoy much importance or status there. This patient, Soldier Mansour, who'd been shot in his left leg, taking out a chunk of bone of his tibia, leaving almost effectively another knee halfway down his shin bone, despite his leg bending in the wrong place and being unable to take weight on it, when he needed his operation, he was made to hop the 200 yards from his ward bed to the theatre. Closer to home, the Department of Health noted some work I'd done with carpal tunnel syndrome and gave my contact details to some inventors from Finland. This was the beginning of a long research partnership and friendship. They designed this gadget for trying to diagnose carpal tunnel syndrome and being able to do it on the desktop. As a result of their input and our own changing of the way we did things, we managed to drop the waiting list from 102 weeks down to 4 weeks. And we were, though you may not be able to see, we were able to introduce stylish Leicester Tigers headgear to Finland at that same time. Becoming a Royal College examiner gave me a chance to travel and to turn gamekeeper as well, sitting on the nicer side of the desk while we decided who would be allowed to follow in our footsteps and become consultants. This examining reinvigorated my interest in teaching and training, leading to a local award as the Leicester Orthopaedic Trainees Association Trainer of the Year and a place in the national finals. I may not have got the national award, but I did get a free weekend away, a slap-up meal for me and the missus, and a golf game. By now, I'm getting on in years. So what was going to happen next? Obviously, you look ahead and you think, well, what am I going to do? Before I could really think about doing something different at work or maybe retiring, something else came along, excuse me, in that I ended up back where I started, in a hospital bed. Somewhat ironically for a spine surgeon, I developed spinal stenosis, and so ended up, a day after I'd done an operating list in my own hospital, I was admitted to a bed on the same ward and ended up having a 2-level spinal decompression. Despite it being a condition where walking becomes difficulty, once again I was denied a porter and they made me walk to the operating theatre as well. I presume somebody pushed me back afterwards, but I was unconscious at that point, so missed the excitement. Fortunately, the operation was very successful, and I decided that I didn't want to carry on working at that point in case it all came back again and I missed out on some good years while I was young enough and fit enough to enjoy them. I therefore gave up my clinical practice at 58, devoting myself to self-improvement. One particular imperative was that I had slipped some way behind my Rotary friends on the golf front. And blessed as I am with the superb golfing genes potentially present in all Northern Irish men, I had to devote myself to reducing my handicap. Alas, just as I was starting to hit some form and had a realistic chance of reaching my potential, along comes another spiky infective thing to cause problems. Thus it was, in April this year, I found myself pounding the corridors of the hospital again, back at the bottom of the food chain with little status and uncomfortable steel toe-capped shoes. 45 years after I first pushed a hospital trolley, I was once again acting as the invisible lifeblood of a hospital, making things happen, moving stuff and patients to where they need to be. Ed Coughlin asked me if portering had changed much with the passage of time. And the answer is not really. The trolleys and wheelchairs have improved, if not a great deal, but it's still a privileged role to be making the many departments in a big organization function smoothly and to help vulnerable patients negotiate that system. One thing I did notice that has changed are the posters on the wall, and I think that's definitely for the better. 45 years ago, the threat to life then was real and very indiscriminate. You really didn't know what was going on, and it wasn't terribly reassuring to see something like that pinned up on the doors at work. Nowadays, it's all a little bit gentler. Nice rainbow on the bottom of the picture. Still a dangerous situation, but we at least have some control over the risks and can feel that all of society hopefully is trying to help manage this current problem. I'm going to stop there and say thank you very much indeed for putting up with my ramblings. I hope my vague theme on the circular nature of life and the randomness of infection may give you some pause for thought. And I'm happy to answer any questions if such things arise. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, Tim. Thank you very much. I feel like there's a book in here somewhere. Have you thought about maybe going that far?
Now, how do I close that down?
I can try it from my end.
I think
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh no, you need to stop screen sharing. I'll just have it. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So do we have any questions from members? And if you do, could you please unmute yourself first? Put your hand up if you like, and I'll see if I can spot you. John, yes.
Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
I'm very grateful to Tim. 9 years ago, he gave me a new knee, and it's been absolutely fantastic. It really has.
Outside the guarantee now, obviously.
The only thing that did worry me was that after the operation, I asked you how long it would last, and you said it'll last about 10 to 15 years. It should see you out. As I've only got 6 years to go, I'm going to make sure I look after myself.
Very sensible.
But thank you very much. It was very good.
Good stuff.
That's great. Thanks, John. I saw another question somewhere. Yes, Paul.
Tim, are you still portering, or have you now stood down again?
I'm now stood down again. At one stage there were 17 porters off for one reason or another, either self-isolating because of vulnerability or because of symptoms. And at that stage, really all hands were welcome. But that now seems to have run its course. Testing is better. I had an antibody test while I was portering, which turned out that I was positive for antibodies. So now I'm donating plasma instead as my bit to fight the COVID.
Very impressive. Okay, do you have any further questions? Okay, thank you very much, Tim. And I've recorded the presentation. Is it okay if we put that on our social media page?
Yeah, that's fine. It's all public stuff, I think.
Thank you. And I would like to bring in Richard at this point, if possible. Richard, maybe just give us an update. I know members very much like to hear what's going on from your end.
Yeah, as it's 6 months now since the pandemic sort of hit UK, I thought it'd be quite useful just to give you a factual update on from Leicester's point of view of where things were. And sort of first or second week in March is when we started to see cases and hospital admissions rising. So in the 6 months to 2 weeks ago, UHL treated 1,675 patients with COVID-19. Sadly, 440 of them, roughly, I say roughly because there's always a bit of fuzziness around this, that's what we reported to NHS England anyway, 440 people died. And the excess death rate, roughly speaking, for that 6 month period was about 240 or so. And the majority of that was in the 6 week period between April through to mid-May. There were no UHL healthcare workers amongst that, which is very good. 28% of the mortality was from the BAME population, which is probably roughly proportionate to our overall catchment area. But within the younger age group of those who are in the younger age group, the BME population was predominant. Gender-wise, and this should worry us all, 1% of us were of the male and 39% were female. So I think there's a bit of gender inequality there. Looking at the age distribution, we had 5 deaths in the age under 40, but of those 4 were, shall we say, imported from elsewhere, because we have the ECMO facility at Glenfield. We do tend to get sicker patients coming in from elsewhere. Within the so 87% of the deaths were in the 60 plus age group within the hospital. And if you bring in the care homes, which obviously are not included in these statistics, it probably takes it well over 90%, over 60. And for those under 60, the vast majority had comorbidities, in particular obesity and diabetes, and that is the group that there was also a BME predominance. As the things are at the moment, there are only 16 patients in the hospital, which is 1% of our bed base being used. And in the past 4 weeks, there have been 3 deaths. This is despite Leicester having 4 times the national average of infections currently. But despite the fact that it's now probably 2 to 3 months since UHL was really fully exposed to COVID, we're still struggling to get back to full activity, and most of the elective activity is only running at about 60%, and that's largely because of new social distancing measures and ongoing shielding with key staff members. The private hospitals, as you may or may not know, were basically commandeered by the NHS, and that's going through until the end of the year, and they are running at about 25% activity. And primary care is also still struggling to get back to face-to-face. But I think looking at it on a worldwide basis, roughly 1 million people so far have succumbed to COVID-19. If you look back at world data in the last year for which we have full data is 2018, in the same 8-month period, if you take from the beginning of January, in 2018, 6 million died of heart disease, 3.8 million died of stroke, 4 million died of influenza, pneumonia, or other lung diseases that weren't cancer. Another further 1 million died of lung cancer. 1.3 million people died of dementia, 1 million of diabetes, 1 million were killed in road traffic accidents, 1 million died of TB, and 1 million died of diarrheal diseases. So that just puts it into perspective on a worldwide basis. So I think I'm actually quite optimistic about Leicester for this winter, because we have been having a higher number of infections, but we're not seeing this translating into hospital admissions or deaths. And so that would suggest to me that, first of all, we're being quite effective at protecting those people who are vulnerable, i.e. the elderly. Secondly, we probably will be developing a better herd immunity than other areas, because we are exposing, or the virus seems to be spreading within the population. And also we are much better, with better understanding of the disease itself. There are certain treatments that are showing, like dexamethasone, that are showing to be beneficial, and we're getting a better understanding of usage of things like ventilators, and that they're not necessarily the panacea that was originally thought. My view is that I think we should be pretty optimistic about this year. I mean, I'm sure there will be an increase in hospital admissions and increase in deaths, but I don't think it'll come anywhere near where we were in April and May. That gives you just basically an overview of where things have been up to now. Whether lockdown made any difference to that, whether it would have been any better or any worse without lockdown. What I do know is when I went to London last Tuesday to go to the National Gallery, I stood on the platform at Leicester Square Tube Station at 5:05 in the evening, rush hour, and there were 3 people on the platform. So London has had its heart ripped out. And I think it's going to take a long, long time to recover.
Okay, thank you for that. Some optimism there. Thank you, Richard. How about in terms of the schools then? Would you say then we should let it spread amongst the children? As long as the vulnerable are protected, that should be a good thing overall because of that herd immunity argument?
Well, I think it's not a question of whether we should let it spread. I think you know, I think there's a certain degree of hubris amongst the politicians to think somehow we can control the spread of the virus. I mean, social distancing probably dampens it down a bit, but to think that we can control nature, I think I think it just will spread through schools and probably on an asymptomatic basis. But as I say, I mean, the children are pretty well almost guaranteed not to get ill with COVID, which is different to flu. With influenza, children die, but they don't die of COVID-19. So I think, you know, inevitably will. My personal view is that the working population should be at work, and I think that schools should be back at school. But we do, you know, should continue to protect those who are vulnerable, which is undoubtedly overwhelmingly those in the post-retirement age group.
Okay, thank you. And do you have any questions or comments from members? No? Okay. Thank you again, Richard. Very much appreciated. Next meeting, we have Nigel Jobson, who's the business manager at St. Martin's House. He will be sharing how life at St. Martin's